Journalism is often referred to as the first draft of history. That's because it's an attempt to make sense of things in the moment that it's actually happening or while it's still relatively fresh. We don't always have the benefit of emotional distance or the time that we would want to gather all of the facts. Um, I'm going to approach this in an effort to highlight like what are the features of responsible journalism so that you can recognize it and allow journalists to convince you themselves that they are acting in good faith rather than dictating to you which news feeds and you should subscribe to. Um, if they're practicing good journalism, then they should be able to show you rather than tell you. So what you see here is an attempt to very narrowly define some types of stories that you'll see in the media. Uh, this is by no means the only way to conceive of this, and this is very, very, very simplified. So the first being breaking news, which is I'm going to define as bare bones reporting on current events, stays very close to the facts, but this is a human being attempting to put into words what is going on, so it cannot be totally divorced from any kind of interpretation whatsoever. Word choices matter. Was it a protest or was it a riot? Analysis. This is an attempt to provide background information for an audience that may not recognize connections to other events or is unfamiliar with what elements make this story significant. So there's more interpretation going on, but it's still trying to stay on the side of explaining rather than trying to provoke a specific emotional response or feeling. So editorial, this is the most emotional, most subjective. You have a commentator going further than analysis, putting more of their personal values and worldview into a topic in order to make an argument for a specific response that they want to see from the audience. Building trust. As much as we might want to and often say that we believe that the media should be completely and totally neutral, um, in all practicality, that's not strictly possible. Journalists are human beings. They are applying some of their own judgment to what they're observing, what they're trying to tell us. Um, Even if the purpose is exposition or explanation, there is still a little bit of an argument being made, even if that argument is that you should believe this version of events that I am telling you. So here are some quick reference points for what that looks like in practice. Like a good research paper, good journalism is clear about its sources. The news consumer should be able to reconstruct the events described using the provided evidence. Now, exceptions do apply. Sometimes witnesses and sources have their identities concealed for their own protection or privacy. And you are being asked in these situations to trust that the journalist is being reasonable in allowing them to have this protection and that their reasons for requesting it are valid. Journalism, like many professions, has a code of ethics that can be researched, and media organizations will generally have editorial policies that describe how they determine what is newsworthy and how they decide what is fair and responsible reporting. These are all things that are fairly easy to look up if you do searches for them. There are many journalistic professional organizations that you can Google. They will outline their code of ethics. Any news website that's credible should have a section where you can find their editorial policies. Stories about current events develop very quickly. In the wake of a dramatic and complex situation, reporters are faced with hard choices. What does the public need to know, and what is trivia? When does the public need to know? How easily can the reporter verify what they've learned? There's an old joke in Pretty much every service industry, you often see it in car repair shops. Cheap, fast, or good. Pick any two. The implication being that anything that is cheap and fast won't be good. Anything that's fast and good won't be cheap. You get the idea. If you've ever waited to write a research paper until it was almost due, then you have an idea of what it's like to try to do good, accurate work on a tight deadline. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't trust anything that you read or see, but be open to corrections and new discoveries. Contradictions in how we talk about a story now versus how it was originally understood when it was first unfolding are often held up as a sign of something nefarious happening. Well, there's a lot of good reasons why it can happen for entirely innocent or even good reasons. We're used to Google time, but discovering new information takes time. A person did hours, days, even years of work to make content that we just skim. Public records laws, such as the Freedom of Information Act, can result in the release of documents years after an event. The descendants of notable people are often more willing to tell their stories and share journals after that person is deceased. Changes in the availability of evidence and cultural attitudes change what we think is relevant or who is credible. So these are all things to take into consideration on why you should be open to updating your assumptions about how the world works or how a story was first reported. Context matters. A case study. In 1994, a woman was awarded $2.9 million after suing McDonald's after spilling hot coffee on herself. In 2022 terms, this story, quote unquote, went viral. It was talked about on TV, written about extensively, and so on and so forth. It was also widely mocked by some and used as an example of greed and a broken legal system. But there are some very important details missing here. When 50 words aren't enough. When the 81-year-old woman spilled coffee on herself, it was McDonald's policy to serve coffee between 180 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost boiling. The woman was hospitalized for a week with third-degree burns and required a skin graft. The most thorough story published on the day of the trial verdict was 697 words long. Some reports were as short as 48 words. This slide is 76 words long.